The rest of this morning is going to be spent with folks coming up and doing this model. And the only thing, what we're asking is, in your explanation, if you can be succinct in your explanation and use personal, whatever example you want to use, that's fine. So there's going to be a lot of really good stuff that comes with this. And so we just want to kind of set the stage for you to see yourselves as the agents of this work being spread around the country.
I'm Jim Irwin. I work with Christian Heritage Fatherhood Initiative. I wanted to talk about what can cause distortion in our lives as we work with clients. And I just want to give a personal example of that happened in my life and I'm still struggling with. But my mental health standard is love, and I feel like love is the basis for all that we do. You can't fool people about whether you love them or not. You can't go to school and learn how to love people. That has to come from within, and for me it comes from the Lord. I've been preaching love and grace and mercy to these guys for about 20 years, and I believe it. I've worked with people that we talk about sex offenders. I had a young man, juvenile offender, who had multiple sex offenses, predatory on kids from daycare centers. I loved and accepted and worked with him, and I've had others as well. And that love only can come from somewhere else besides training. So I feel like I'm very mentally healthy when it comes to this idea. And I understand that grace, which means undeserved favor, comes from the Lord. And that's what I teach. That's what I preach and have for years. The distortion, manipulation. And I bring out prejudice, which doesn't mean color always. I was a missionary in Central America, and the prejudice was Catholic against Protestant or evangelicals. And they wanted to manipulate or change one another, trying to get them to come to their faith. That is manipulation or prejudice. My condition, personal condition, is I started this work a few months ago. I volunteered at Christian Heritage. I heard we were going to do a reentry program. I said, I want to do that. I want to be a part of that. And my first client was a man who had a foster child in our agency. He had done 5 years for beating up someone with a baseball bat. He got out, grabbed his wife, threw her against the wall, choked her. He's back in jail. So I went in to visit with him, talked to him about setting up visits with his son. Would he like to reconnect? That's our part, reconnect fathers with their children. That's what we want to do. And very loving, very open. He asked me some questions, began to dig deeper into his life, found out some of the issues he had. He just wanted to know, what do I do when I want to grab my wife by the throat and slam her against the wall? I had some answers. You walk away. You leave the room. He shared with me some of his mental health issues, bipolar. When he got out, he couldn't get medication. So we worked through all that, and I was very loving, as usual, very accepting of him. Even though he'd done this horrific thing, I'm understanding. Then a condition came into my own life. That was on a Friday. Over the weekend, we got a call from Oklahoma. Our daughter had been through domestic violence. Her husband threatened to kill her. She was told by the therapist she needed to flee for her life, and we had to go and pick her up and bring her and my 2 grandchildren to our home. And then ultimately she went into a shelter for protection. The condition changed. My thought process changed. The challenge for me was, is this really what I want to do? Do I really want to work with these kind of people? I had thoughts as a Christian that I should never have. That's my baby. So all of a sudden it became personal to me. I thought about doing things that would have put me where the guys were that I wanted to minister to. So went through that on the weekend. We were there. We had her home. On Monday, I had to meet another group of men. One of those men had had domestic violence here in Omaha. He broke a restraining order. He went into the home of his wife with a gun. And he came up after my little talk and he said, would you help me reconnect with my kids? Where's the challenge now? Where's the love and acceptance now? How did I respond? Not the way I responded on Friday. So I was just real to him. I set the guys down and I said, let me explain something to you. Here's what happened to me over the weekend. I'm struggling with this. I don't know what to tell you right now. But I'll tell you this, I'll work with you if I can. My son-in-law had been trying to get a hold of me every day on the phone. He kept calling. I just kept looking at it, hanging it up. That evening on the way home from that meeting, he called and I looked at it and pushed a button and put it in my pocket, and I thought, what are you doing? I'm willing to help all these guys who've done the same thing, but not my own family. So I had to respond in a different way. I had to call him back and start working. How can I? He cries. He's always sorry. They're always sorry. Sorry doesn't mean anything, like we've already discussed. Prove it. Do the right thing. How can I reconnect with my children, he said. First time he called, he asked to talk to his daughter. She ran, hid in the closet, cried. How can I talk to her? So I told him what I tell the guys inside. Write them a letter. Tell them you love them. Start there. So he sent a letter with some little hearts, and some stickers. My granddaughter stuck stickers all over the house, stuck stickers on the dog. Stickers everywhere. Next time he called, Daddy. And I'm telling you my challenge. I didn't want her to talk to him, and I still don't. But it's the right thing to do. I'm still challenged. I'm standing here today. I'm still challenged with this. I still have a different thought process of these kind of guys that I'm going to be working with than I had before. And now I understand the family's perspective. And when I go to this mother and say, can this father reconnect with the child? Will you let them write a letter? I'm going to understand how she feels.
Jared Ray, First Step Recovery in Lincoln. The mental health standard I'm going to talk about today is trust. And what I mean by trust is the ability to embrace a sense of balance in one's life and to believe that one has the capacity to cope with all of life's challenges. I'm taking that gentleman's suggestion from yesterday, and I'm thinking of a client that I've dealt with in a scenario. She was released from prison after her second term. Incarceration, possession of controlled substance. She did 3 years, transitioned to a halfway house. Part of her recovery plan was to attend 12-step meetings, get a 12-step sponsor, get a job, be a tax-paying, responsible citizen. History of trauma, grew up in a single-parent home, alcoholic parent, abandonment issues, other significant childhood issues, history of unhealthy relationships, high-risk behaviors, legal issues related to substance use and or involvement. So like I said, the trait that we're talking about is trust. The distortion that goes along with trust is imbalance. What I mean by imbalance is the distortion expected response to the condition, which is commonly expressed as excessive hope and anxiety. As an addict and somebody with the history that she has instant gratification needs. She's impulsive. She makes poor decisions. She has definite boundary issues and a history of unhealthy signs and symptoms directly related to her substance use and behavior. The conditions that we're talking about are the history of high-risk behavior and what she's been asked to do in life today. She's been placed in a safe, sober living environment to try and get back on track. This is somebody that has never been habilitated in the first place. So rehabilitation is not really the goal. The goal is to show her and try to model what a healthy, productive life looks like, and try to give her as much social support as possible to get her on her feet where she can do it for herself and possibly give back to somebody else another day. The challenges that we face are the self-esteem, self-worth issues. Definitely there's been a lacking of the consistency, the effort on behalf of her, and of course not establishing routine, avoiding old peers. The distortion part where the imbalance comes in is because she wants to be who she's always been. She doesn't want to lose that identity of self. She has that street mentality, if you will, of this is who I've been and who I've known and where I've always been at. But she wants to be somebody else. So this is where the conflict comes in that we kind of talked about yesterday. The imbalance is creating a conflict with her trust issues because she knows who she wants to be, but then she knows who she thinks she is. And that is definitely creating some problems in her life. The response that she has, she confronts the issues where she works on taking it one day at a time, learning how to trust people. With the history of abuse and trauma that she's had, there's definitely been a lack of structure for her to trust other people. She's been kicked while she's down. She feels like the system has failed her. She needs to work on accountability. All this stuff is working in her response to improving this mental health standard of trust. Something I wanted to say when I thought about this was something Delbert Boone said at a conference I saw him at last year. And he said that people don't stay unhealthy based on the outcomes of their substance use or their behavior. People stay unhealthy based on the expected outcome of their substance use or behavior. And what he meant by that was this woman didn't do all these things, and the imbalance with her trust issues didn't contribute to her going to prison necessarily, because she didn't plan on it that way. She didn't say, I'm not going to trust people and then I'm going to get locked up and this is the story of my life. The expected outcome was that she could do what she did. She wouldn't get caught when something went wrong, then she blamed others. So part of that condition is improving the distortion, identifying the challenges, and responding in a more appropriate way to lead a healthier, more productive life.
Good morning, I'm Janae Pancook with Phoenix Transitional Services, and I'm not a clinician, so I'm not going to approach it from that standpoint. I realize in all the domains I have enough of my own stuff to work on. I keep myself plenty busy just doing that, so it's probably a good thing I'm not a clinician. The trait, the emotional or mental health standard I'm going to try and focus on is personal emotional orientation. Do something different than the work we've been doing the last few days, since, like I said, I can probably figure something out in each domain right now. The condition is emotional imbalance, and the mental health standard cooperative is the ability to open oneself to the needs of others, to take action on behalf of others in a joyous manner. The distortion is futility. Response to the condition commonly expressed as apathy or powerlessness. What has happened is, and it's really a condition, my father was or is diagnosed with lung cancer. And so usually that brings a family together, and there's 3 siblings. Mother has passed away, and the response you would think would be, okay, we're going to band together, we're going to address this, we're going to be supportive of each other and our father. But what a distortion has happened, and the challenge is in the regard of one sibling has determined that there's a will. And what does that mean to me? And not so much being progressive and supporting of treatment, but more, hey, we need to talk to Dad about the will, we need to talk about his property. So needless to say, that has created a great deal of tension, and trying to then manipulate, because you can't tell your father that. Your daughter is asking these questions. And so I start manipulating information to that sibling, manipulating information to my father, and then my other sibling, one sister, we're extremely close, and so we're always in cahoots trying to figure out how we're going to do all this and keep everybody happy and those things, while in the meantime, our responses are going back and forth because we're trying to figure out how to control all this, including ourselves. And so that is a struggle to try and find the empowerment and not become such a manipulator in that piece after that information continues to be shared. And then also, there needs to be some healing. And then, but is that a relationship you really want to continue? And yet take care of your father. So I don't think any of these operate in isolation. There's always multiple things happening. And so trying to ferret that out becomes extremely time-consuming and resource-demanding. And I understand in this particular forum we talk about relapse in the form of substance abuse. But trying to manipulate, distort the truth of what's really going on, the communication, and those things. Actually, I fall into relapse with that all the time because I go to the point of, well, you know what, I'm just going to put it out there, and they need to deal with it. It's not mine to control. And then you're like, well, you can't do that. That's going to hurt their feelings and cause tension between them, and he's already sick. What are you doing? And so it's this relapse, no, be healthy, relapse, be healthy, and it's on a continual basis. So I just have to keep working at that. And what was the other thing I was going to say? There was something else in here that I just thought was extremely powerful. I think the apathy, because then that's what I start doing. I start shutting down and isolating and those things. So that continual fight.
I'm Christy Cloyd, and I work at Allegiant Health at the Emmanuel Hospital. And today I'm going to talk about the mental health standard trait, love. And it's defined in here as the ability to express self-love and to love others in the way that enhances their development of self-love as they design a personal path to being themselves. The distortion I would like to talk about is manipulation. And for me personally, I got to share this with you. The condition in my home was much like Ruth's. Imagine that. Father, alcoholic. Just mom is still pretty bitter, codependent, classic codependent, just real angry all the time. And it has been 22 years, and she still complains about Dad. I mean, enough's enough. But for so long, I felt like the problem was me. Like I would go with my mom, and she'd be all mad because I did that with my dad, and it was very difficult. So when I was reading this thing of love, it's like the manipulation was kind of distorted with me in that I couldn't be honest with her and say, hey, you need to chill out a second because Dad has nothing to do with what we're talking about here, and have you ever thought about looking into some counseling? No, I would never say that. But here's an example of what I did do. This was my first breakthrough. Just real quick. Christmas dinner, my mom makes this wonderful, huge Christmas dinner, and we're there, and the kids are eating, and I tell this story in group all the time. And to explain a martyr is what I'm doing. And we're like, God, that was a great dinner, Mom. Need some help with the dishes? No. I got them all. You guys just sit down on the couch. I'll be fine. 10 minutes later, like clockwork, she's slamming stuff around. And we're like, she just told us to sit down. I don't know what. So we get up and we're like, Mom, do you want some help with the No, I got it. But eventually, enough's enough. Eventually, for me, I really had to take a look at that relationship. I mean, who says, yeah, I'm not talking to my mom because she's probably unhealthy? The fear I had, what other people would say about that, was ridiculous. I can say that now. Then it was very real. It was like, oh my God, they'll think I'm such a bad daughter to say that about my mom, and it's my mom, and I should really be there for her. And so learning how to set that boundary and get honest, real honest with her and how things were going to be, I think has really changed the condition, I guess, number one. And my mental health standard, I find it a lot easier in other areas of my life just to, I guess, have love for myself and just accept people where they're at.
Good morning. I'm Gail Youngman-Schultz. I am on the board of directors for Phoenix Transitional Services, which is how I got here. And I'm going to talk about family dysfunction being the condition. Mental health trait will be love. The distortion will be manipulation. We're going to talk about the conditions and challenges. But based on David's recommendations yesterday, I'm going to take, that kind of popular generic client that I have, and also in full disclosure, talk about the fact that I am the mama in my house. And so as I talk about the fact that I work predominantly with men, the fact that one of the things that I do based on who I am is adjust my lens to their needs and hopefully help them look through another lens when they talk about their needs. In terms of love, one of the things that happens when I work with men just walking out of the prison doors is they look at me and they say, I'm going to get my kids back. Oh, really? Well, good for you. That's great. That's wonderful. You really love your kids. Yeah. How many do you have? Talk about that a little bit. How are they doing? Well, I'm not sure. Their mom hasn't let me talk to them for 5 years, 12 years. Oh, so do you know anything about them? You know, what are they doing these days? What are their favorite sports? Are you connected? Well, no. But I'm going to get connected. I'm going to get my kids back. Which leads to the distortion or the manipulation. They're my kids. They become a piece of property to me. I own them. Now, as the mama in my house, the last thing I want to do is have my children owned. And so that begins our conversation about you love your kids. What does that really mean? Tell me how you were loved as a child. And then we move into the conditions. And what causes us to love our children versus really manipulating them. To love, according to our standards here, is to allow another person to be. We love them for who they are, as they are, when they are in that room, at that moment in time. And how hard is that? And in our distortion, we want those children to be for us. So they are not being for them, they are being for us. Is that really love? And is that what we wanted? Is that what we experienced as a child? And so as we began to look at those conditions, well, my dad always wanted me to be this. My mom always said, well, you know, if you don't do this, you won't amount to that. So we have the condition of judgment here. And how does that feel? Are you judging your children? Do you know your children? How long have you been involved? The challenge is for us to love those children despite the fact that we have not necessarily felt or been modeled love to us. And what is our response? I think our response is to learn and grow from that and recognize, that's my need that my child be this. It's my need that my child express love to me. It's my need that my children live with me, even though my children have lived with my baby's mama, which is the term I always hear, for all of their lives. They have a structure there. They have, hopefully, they don't always, they have a structure there. Mom's been the one who's gotten up at night. Mom's been the one who's gone to the school when the school called. Mom's been the one who does this. And again, this works in the reverse. It's just that I work with men, so this is my common client. So we move within these standards of traits and distortions. Love our kid, appreciate my kid. I'm going to begin by going to those soccer games. Somebody said, go to those soccer games and just be there. We write the letters. We do those things that allow us to begin the relationship, and always accepting our children where they're at. We'll let them be, and we'll love them just as they are. In the meantime, my response is to learn to do the same for myself.
My name is Maggie Fisk, and I work at NEPSAC, Northeast Panhandle Substance Abuse Center. The domain I'm going to work within is emotional orientation. The mental health standard of that is cooperative in the ability to open oneself to the needs of others and to take action on behalf of others in a joyous manner. The distortion for this mental health standard is futility. Futility is the expected response to this condition, which is commonly expressed as apathy and powerlessness. In the scenario that I'm going to work with, we're going to add another trait to the definition of the distortion, we're going to add anger, because often we work with clients who respond to that futility, that inability to self-regulate their emotions. They respond with anger. The scenario is the client we're working with is Joe, and as we work with him, we find that he's constantly identifying things you did to him, injuries, disrespect. And so while the distortion is futility, certainly we could add anger because this is his expression of the distortion. Looking at the responses, he's quick to want to identify who the culprit is, who did the injury to him. He's angry constantly, and we notice typically he wants to identify a woman, one of the female counselors, as the person who's done the injury to him. The challenge here is to get Joe to set aside his anger, to give him a sense of safety, create a space for him, so he is willing to set aside his anger and look at the underlying condition that's creating the response. And in this scenario, we find that Joe was forced. His father was a trucker, and when his father would come home on the weekend, he would go to the bar and drink. And Joe felt that he had to go sit. He was 12 years old when he started sitting in the back of the bar watching his father drink so that he could get him home safely. He felt, obviously, there's a lot of trauma to that and a lot of neglect. So, again, the challenge for us with Joe, working in Joe, is how do we get him to feel safe enough where he's willing to set aside his anger and look at the underlying conditions of pain and childhood trauma.
I'm Robert with New Beginnings Counseling Services, and the mental health standard that I'm going to talk about is actually intimacy. The condition that I want to talk about is a particular client who actually was mildly mentally retarded and used substance abuse as a way to connect with people. It was a very easy entry point for him because when everybody else was high, he was at the same level, and they didn't expect anything of him, and so it was very easy for him to connect with people in that way. Now, the problem with that, distortion-wise, is that the very process of hanging out with people who are essentially high is dissociating from them, and you're not connecting with any of them. Now, when you looked at the challenge that involved this particular client, the thing that really, there were really two challenges. One is how do you begin to develop healthy connections for this individual so that he can connect, he can have intimacy, he can be seen for who he is. But the other challenge is he doesn't necessarily have the cognitive functions to be able to process through all this. And, and that's one of the things that I liked about what Khalil was talking about, because it dawned on me that his cognitions and perceptions are always going to be filtered through his values. For this client, the most important thing was acceptance. I mean, more than anything else, he valued acceptance, and as long as that was the value, it made perfect sense that he was always going to make the decision that this was okay. So in regards to the response then is how do you develop self-worth for this guy? How do you create a sense that he has something to offer other people that they would want to engage with him on, and he could develop relationships that were meaningful and mutual?
I'm Carolyn Cooey, and I'm with Valley Hope Outpatient Facility here in Omaha. And I'm going to talk today about family dysfunction, intimacy along with PTSD. I grew up in a very, very abusive home where my father was an alcoholic. We watched my brother being abused, not only physically but sexually. My oldest sister was sexually molested. I and my sister didn't get into any of that. So the distortion in our family, and especially for me, was I don't know who these people are. I don't belong to these people. I even at one time told my little sister that I was actually John Kennedy's daughter because he had a daughter named Caroline. My name's Carolyn. She was devastated by that, but it made me feel better. The condition in our household was absolutely terrible. We've seen my mother almost die on several occasions. There was no intimacy in my family. It was only abuse and rape. That's all we ever seen. It affected all of us in different ways. Everybody took a different way of getting their needs met. I chose alcohol. But the funny thing about it was, my response to all this was, I became an alcoholic and an abusive alcoholic, just like my father. My brother, who watched all of this and is 5 years older than I am, became abusive to his wives, because he had several, and ended up getting into the mafia in California because it made him somebody. So that was his response to the condition and all of the other garbage that was all going on. He spent 20 years in prison in New Jersey, got out, went to Florida, and got into all kinds of problems out there again. I mean, the man just didn't learn. I, on the other side, took the opportunity to go to AA and become a sober, functioning person in society. He chose the other way. He is still in the mafia. He has his own business as a front. So it just goes to show you that this disease is awful that we have in alcoholism and drug addiction. He was into every kind of drug there was too. I personally only did alcohol because drugs was not. I'm not going to be a drug addict. I don't want that label.
My name is Andrea Bowens, and I'm employed with Nova Therapeutic Community. A 44-year-old woman is being released from prison right now as we speak. She has 4 felony convictions, 2 of which are centered around drugs. 1, intent to distribute. Another would be a possession charge of crack cocaine. She became involved in a long-term relationship with the dope boy. He was also a gang member. Within this long-term relationship together, they had 3 children. This young lady dropped out of high school. She did not have a job. She was never employed outside of the home. Her particular employment was to take care of the man, tend to the children, and take care of the home, in that order. So she had not a splotchy work history. She had no work history at all, unless you consider the tremendous amount of sales that she made with her turning of a sack of cocaine. She grew up in a home. She resided out of state where she had no family available to her. She grew up in a home with 2 absent parents. It was a single-parent home where the mother was in the home. However, she worked a full-time job, a part-time job, attended collegiate courses in the evenings, and slept on the weekend. The father was never there. She had 2 meetings with him. They were 15 to 20 minutes in a length, and they always ended abruptly with a verbal altercation with the mother and the father, police being called. Father was taken out of the home. Even though she had absolutely no interaction with this father other than those 2 visits, she adored him. Due to some of the emotional suffering that she endured, most importantly, not having the father in the home, she had some very skewed perceptions in regards to men, women, and relationships. As I was looking over this scenario, I was able to identify all 7 of the criminogenic needs domains, which would be the education and the employment, the marital and the family, the associations / social interactions, substance dependence, abuse, community functioning, personal as well as emotional orientation, and then the attitudes. So what I decided from that was that I would choose the associates and social interactions as the domain, and with that particular mental health standard comes the friendship. And this would be the ability to make room in one's life for the needs of others. Now, the distortion that goes along with that is commonly viewed as selfishness and dominance in men, but as I've had the opportunity to take a look at some of the young women who have sat across the desk from me, a lot of times it is viewed as passivity and a dependence on others to control their lives. And so the response to this particular distortion would tend to be the response to the condition. The condition is the unhealthy relationships. And the response to the condition is that more distance is created because this person is depending upon another person to validate them or to make them feel better about who they are. The challenge in this particular model would be to create some autonomy in some of these young women who come in. A lot of times as I'm looking across the desk, the first thing that comes out of their mouths is, when can I see him? And so a lot of that is born out of the fact that they have the low self-worth. They don't feel that they are able to care for themselves. They don't feel as if they're able to protect themselves, and they're looking for someone else to do that. Even though their needs are being met in a crooked manner by someone else, they are still being met.
The domain I chose was personal emotional orientation. This is a 23-year-old divorced male. He has had a felony at the age of 19 for fraudulent activity. And he also has an 8-month-old son. And what he did was, when he got out of jail in one state, he went to another state with the okay through his parole officer to start fresh. So when he came in, we needed to, kind of dissect and what we need to go through. And really this fits him and what he was trying to do with this fresh start that he wanted. As far as the trait, the cooperative, is the ability to open oneself to the needs of others and to take action on behalf of others in a joyous manner. And the distortion is futility, which is the expected response to this condition, which is commonly expressed as empathy and powerlessness. And with that, going back to his family, the condition, he really needed to work through his family, the divorce issues, stepmom issues, abandonment issues, leading back again to the distortion. The challenges in these, back in the community, is the anger issues over the divorce and really, having to work through all of that. He had to take a look at his spirituality again. He was very spiritual before all of this had happened, and once he got in trouble, once he was caught, he lost all of that. And so regaining that for him was very important, and it became very powerful within his recovery. And there was no chemical addiction with this man at all, but he still needed to recover from his experiences. He needs to work on intimate and social issues. He also needed to reprocess the legal experience that he went through. Many people are, they come out and, well, it wasn't my fault, or somebody, ratted me out. He really needed to go through that legal process and take accountability for what he had done, and that the legal process was just that. It was a process that he had to go through. Employment was a big factor. He had a felony, and so finding good employment was very difficult for him. Once he did, and things didn't go his way, then he, again, that whole circle here, he went back and was very angry again and would act out, in turn lose his job. And that's part of the process. You learn from that experience, and you take what you learn from that experience to the next job. And again, that cycle starts.
It will be from the substance dependence program, because that's what I do, and his issues are family. Part of his distortion is that he can keep that family stuff as a secret, and it's led to third DUI, aggravated. So he's looking at some pretty significant legal issues that are going on because of his own distortion. He's not allowed himself to get inside until just recently to even tell what the family secrets are. So his condition, he grew up in a very dysfunctional, abusive dad. His sister was sexually abused. He was physically abused. Mom kind of turned her head because what else was she going to do? She was uneducated, couldn't go out and make her own living. So they were stuck in this. But by the time Dad was still abusing him and the kids began, the boys at least, began to fight back, that's when Dad just kicked them out. Rather than to back down from the abuse that he was giving to them, he just kicked them out. So my client left home at, I think he was kicked out at 15. At 17 he joined the service. He also got married at 17, which is another family secret that he hasn't even told his wife now. The challenge with this client is to allow him to be okay with his past so he can deal with it and move on from it. His response has been, I'll do it, but I don't want to. And then when he does open up a little bit, then he shuts down again. And then he'll open up a little bit more, and he'll shut down again. Hopefully, sometime he will be able to get, like Khalil was talking about, to that truth. This is who I am. This is where I came from, and the family secret will be broken. And that's really the challenge that I've been working with him.
I want to talk about a couples counseling that I was doing with, so I'll do something a little bit different. Situation is both the male and female in this situation were in their 20s. One night she was at a bar. He went to go meet her. Everything was fine. He decided to leave a little bit earlier. He had been drinking, had a car accident, bad car accident, was in a coma for months. This couple had been going out for just a couple months, but were really close. They really thought each other was the one for them. During the time that he was in the coma, she went to see him all the time. His family didn't like her there because they blamed her for him being in an accident, and her family really didn't like him because he was drinking all the time, and his drinking caused the accident. So they got that on both sides of the family. He's now paralyzed from the waist down, and but she still wants to be in this relationship. And since I've been seeing him, I think some of the distortions. Well, there's many distortions. He at times wants to buy into that it wasn't his fault that he was in an accident caused by his drinking. You know, it was caused by her being out at the bar, and if he hadn't met her, he probably wouldn't have seen her that night, and therefore he wouldn't have had an accident. That's a distortion. The other thing that he has problems with is his girlfriend is you know, she's beautiful, she's smart, she's the type of girl that walks into a bar and have 7 guys come up to her, and now he's paralyzed. So in his mind, I'm not good enough for her. So I think part of the other distortion, it's her fault. I think that's a game he plays to push her away. I think that's one of the things that he does is push her away. He's testing to see how much she'll put up with him. And then in talking with her, she keeps saying, I like my old boyfriend. I'm not talking about before he was paralyzed. Obviously, I wouldn't want him to be paralyzed, but I just want the love, the respect that we had for each other to return. So those are some of the challenges that we're facing. I mean, at times I'm like, he doesn't want you. With them both together, I'll say, he doesn't want you. He said he doesn't want you. Why don't you leave? She said, I don't want to leave. I just want him to go back to who he was. And and then and he's debating whether he can be that